Okay, welcome to Conversation. A pleasure to welcome to the program Randolph or Randy Corbett. He's a friend of law of a couple of years now, has been doing magnificent work in terms of elucidating a good deal of the unjust, unworkable nature of our court system, and that within an unworkable understanding of the political process, even on a larger pattern. And very important work that he's doing. He's got an important story to tell. And Randy, welcome so much again to Conversation.
It's always a pleasure, Harold. And I want to start off by letting people know once again, I lost my property in 2000, but it was fully paid for, and I didn't owe anything. And I was sucked into this scam with the help of documents from the city. I've also come to understand that the court system in itself aids the criminals in that you can have papers that are filed in court and go back a week later and the dates on them are changed to benefit the predators. I've also learned that there are plenty of people who have. Now, one of the stories that we've all heard was that most people signed for mortgages that they knew they couldn't afford, is how they lost their homes. Most people
in 2008. More,
well,
or that
the whole
period.
Scam started in the latter part of 1900.
Okay,
and they were only basically experimenting with that. It accelerated as they perfected the system.
Right. Okay.
Across the country.
Right.
We've come to understand that people need to understand that there's a difference between a court building and the court itself.
Okay.
Because in the system here, you can be lured to the court.
You can be what?
Lured to the court.
Lured.
Yes,
Okay,
lured
sorry,
to the court with a official-looking document.
Sure.
And then steered into a room, and you think that you are actually in the court because you're talking to someone, and only to find out that all that was staged. Okay.
Yeah.
It happens here in New York City. It happened to me. I know now, but I didn't know then, that I was being lured to the court with fake documents, because when you get them most of the time, you look at them and you're trying to examine them.
Right.
You don't understand the significance of what it's supposed to be as opposed to what you actually have.
Yeah.
And only after years do you begin to understand that, for example, we have what's called public records.
Yes.
Okay? When you have a case, you can go down to the court, you can put in a form, and you can request from the court that file.
Yeah.
Now that file is a public file, okay? Which means, now let's say you have a case. I can go down to the court, I can requisition that tape, your file, and I can put anything in there I want to put in there, and then give it back to the clerk.
Wait a minute. Okay, and those court records are available? Are public.
Yes, that means you.
Would that cover all court proceedings?
All court. Well, some of them are closed.
Is that would be where there's a court reporter and everything is being filed in an official, done in an official way? It's not just a hearing or a meeting or something.
But the tapes of the trial.
Tapes.
Yeah, they make tapes.
From the court reporter.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, but those are kept in a separate place.
Okay.
We're talking about primarily pieces of paper that goes into the file.
Yeah.
So if I need to say that I saw Harold on January 5th and I spoke to him and I got him to sign this, I can create that document and put it in your file, and your file will be put back into the court records.
How do they guard against somebody doing that?
They don't guard against it. It's public records.
Well,
public has access to the records.
If that's the case, then where there's money involved or something, then the records you would depend upon to take your position or have your position in the court would be totally nullified.
Okay, but the secret part of it is that that's when it's going to the public file. But when something is going into the court, then it's stamped, dated, and signed, filed. So if you got your record from the court, if a document doesn't say that it was filed and entered into the court, it did not legally go through the court.
Does it have to have some sort of a note of a stamp or something
Yes,
that makes it that way?
That shows that it was taken into the court.
So then somebody can't introduce one of those into a file that's public and introduce something that looks like it's got the seal and everything like that and counterfeit it?
Yes, they can.
Out and out counterfeit?
Yes, they can. Yes, they
can.
can.
I would think, given the fact there's lots of money involved very often, there might be a whole underground business in that.
Well, listen, when you know...
As part of the legal apparatus.
Well, look, there is a company, I believe it was called USB, that the federal government sued for $5 billion, and they were charged with fraud. They've come to understand what USB was doing. USB was a company that created documents for attorneys.
Okay.
So if you go to court and say, well, listen, Your Honor, I examined my file and XYZ form is not there, they can literally pick up the phone, have that document created, and gotten to the attorney and gotten back into your file.
With the seals and so forth?
Read all of it, USB, what they were charged with fraud. There were companies on the internet. There's one, I think it's called doc.com.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Okay, where there's a literal price list. For example, if you go to court and say, well, I do not see the summons and complaint, they create one. I don't see an affidavit of service, they'll create one. Whatever was missing, they would create the file in order to go forward in the court case.
Well, that would, that's staggering.
But the problem is the average person do not understand that the court system has become part of our problem. Okay? It's not operating in the defense of the person, of the people. It's operating in behalf of those who would, for example, you go to court and you can literally say, as I have said, Your Honor, this doesn't make sense. This is not there. And they'll go on. For example, in my case, I complained to the judge that when we were called before the bench, they did not swear me or the defendant in, which meant that anything he said was not being taken under oath. So how can you have a legal case if you're not under oath, being with threat of penalty of perjury?
Okay.
So they can say anything.
One of the things in my speaking with you is my daddy was a lawyer, but I don't know the law. But you, after having been robbed of your property and so forth, were actually homeless.
5 years.
And you, to your credit, your great good credit, makes you one of my heroes. Instead of just languishing or something like that, you actually had to sleep on subways at night and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And you would go and get yourself dressed and go and educate yourself at law libraries to what the law is in order to try and understand it. But it's so incredibly complex, is it not?
I think that people I think people assume
it's
the complexity.
And they want them to assume
and they want you to. And there are huge battles going on across the country because they often say that contracts are written in what's called legalese.
Yes.
People are demanding that we want plain English contracts now, so that they can be written in a plain language so the average person can understand.
You think that's a good idea?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Why is it done otherwise? Is that some historical?
No, historical. No, it's part of the system to disempower you from being able to understand, so that you cannot do what you necessarily have to do to defend yourself.
Right. There's a term sacerdotal, I don't know if you know it, but it appeared to the monks and so forth who could understand the writings of divine scripture and that kind of stuff. It's just intrinsic. They understand it in nuance and everything. And every specialization would want to have that be the relationship to the broader society in order to make their services more rare and scarce and therefore more valuable.
More valuable.
Yeah, see, so it's that. And that's what they've done. Apparently.
Yeah.
But that's like staggering that that's the case. I still can't quite, are there any safeguards against such counterfeit? They did catch up with USB, did you call it?
Well, that was one of them.
Yeah, okay, with others. It would be like a business, I would think, because it would involve lots of money.
And not only that, lots of lies, too.
Yeah, well, lies in the court. Well, you
and
can have
fraud.
a lie that you spat on the sidewalk, but you've got a $10,000 or $100 million project going. You know, that's a different order of magnitude.
Okay, but think of this. Think of there are 14 million people who lost their property. How many forms would that generate? How much money are you talking about?
Well,
how many fees are you talking about?
Yeah.
How many individuals would you be employed? There is a story on. I think you remember the issue of robo-signing?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I think Scott Pelley did a great little report that got a lot of traction.
Let me explain to people what robo-signing really is, okay? When you go to the court and the attorney is attempting to take your property, he has to say to the judge, Your Honor, I have gone through every single piece of paper, every line, and I am under oath saying that all this is true. Supposed to be signed by the attorney representing the bank. But they were foreclosing on people's homes so fast that they couldn't do it. So the story is online that they would go out and they would hire guys who lost their job at Walmart. They would hire people who used to be pizza delivery boys. They would hire people straight off the street, people who didn't even understand the word of affidavit,
right?
And were being paid to sign.
Just signing the thing as though they were a bank official or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the thing is that what happened when they went to court, they were saying that you were a victim of robo-signing.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But that's not a legal term. What you needed to call them was that you were a victim of fraud. You see, counterfeit, forgery. Those are legal terms that carry weight. The weight of robo-signing is nothing.
That's interesting. That's interesting in and of itself.
You see,
but the act itself is.
The act itself, but the way it's determined and represented in court is a whole different act in itself.
Were the people who were hired for $10 an hour to sign things as fast as they could, were they held guilty, or were the people who set up that system held guilty? How high up the system of responsibility for the legal system itself has that kind of thing been known about at continents and gone along with?
Across the country.
Across the country, right up to the top of our...
Across the country.
Across the country.
Across the country.
And up the ladder of jurisdiction, appeal, and that sort of thing.
Every level.
And it's all sort of, and how that company you talked about was
but that was just one.
That was one. Okay, I'm not getting it, but what I'm trying to get, I'm looking systemically. And is it a wink, nink, nod? We know you're being fraudulent in what you're doing, but we understand the need, and everybody accepts it? Do people accept the fraud that is inherent in the system that benefits those who maybe have the most money to bribe somebody or something? It's hard to get at how corrupt and how
put it this way.
How
permissive. Okay, think of it this way, Harold. Across the entire country, maybe 2 million mortgages were signed through the or documents were signed.
You're back to the robo-signing of the mortgage.
Yes, but that takes a lot of people. It's not something that can be done under the table. It has to be a conscious effort for people to design the forms, to get the service, to get them to you.
But you're saying it's a fraudulent act.
It's part of the system to defraud people out of their property.
Well, then the system is fraudulent. I mean, or countenances fraudulent activity in order to maintain certain principles by which the legal system of justice is supposedly administered and fought for by lawyering class.
Okay, but at the same time, understand that the lawyering class is part of it.
Yeah. Right,
and they understand.
And the political class.
And they also know that they can call a particular company and say, I'm missing this document, and the document will come to court and be put in the file and be presented to the judge.
So these 14 million people that have been thrown out of their homes without were there some where there wasn't?
It was an all robo-sign. There are plenty of other instances where there are fraud. For example, you go to supposedly a broker.
Yeah.
To get a mortgage.
Yeah.
And you go through all your paperwork. One of the things that the law says is that you're supposed to be able to produce documents to show that you are qualified to purchase it. If you can't produce that show that you're qualified to purchase it, you shouldn't get a loan. That's number one. Number two, we know many of cases where people have signed the papers and went through the process and never got a dime, yet got their houses taken. They never got a dime. Yet the lawyer could go to the court and show the judge the papers and say, "This is evident by the signature that the loan was made." And the court never asked the lender, prove that the person got the money. Well, if there's no proof you got the money, then there was no mortgage.
And then there was no way that the person who was in that position could assert that within the courts?
They do assert it.
Yeah, and what happens when they try to assert that?
The lawyer simply says, Your Honor, it's evident by the documents being signed that there was a mortgage.
There was that judge, the judge who he's suggesting that to is aware that the document was created fraudulently? He knows it
could have been created legally with your intent to get the money for the house. Legally. You literally went out and tried to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you went through all the papers, and the papers went through wherever they're supposed to, and the lender could have come and gave the money to the loan officer who never gave you a dime. Okay? And then they came after you because it was your name on the paper and the house was pledged.
In your name?
Yeah.
Was that what happened to you?
No, mine was completely false. It was a fake. I was lured out to Westbury to an office building where there was a whole table full of individuals, even had a person who was supposed to be paid out of the loan proceeds representing me as my attorney at this closing. All of it turned out to be fake.
Really?
Yes. Every single piece of it. And in fact, I'm in federal court now. The last time I was there was this morning. I put in, there's a thing where, let's say you're supposed to put in some papers by Friday. Yeah. And Friday is coming. And you don't have time to do it. So you file a motion with the court for what they call, it's either an extension of time, depending if you get it from the federal rules, or if you get it from the federal procedure, which is a lawyer set, that says a motion to enhance the time. They actually call it to enlarge the time. Okay. So you file those papers. But if you don't know that, time could come and
also, at the time you were being targeted, you didn't know that.
I didn't know none of this.
You didn't know anything, like you're a normal person.
Listen, I didn't even know that there was a book called The Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. I didn't even know there was such a book to be able to go there.
As is the case with the vast majority of people. So they're easy targets.
Yes, you can.
In their ignorance,
listen, when you look at most people and you think of the mortgage scams that they were victim of. People always want to say, "Oh, they should have known this, they should have known that," but no one's talking about Bernie Madoff, $70 billion of some of the richest, most educated people, and they were snapped up. So why couldn't the average person be snapped up? Why can't they be given the same credit as those who are rich to say you were a victim? Why is everyone calling the victim the sucker? The fool, the person who did, they were victims. Just like the people who were victims of of his Ponzi. But you never hear of that. You never hear them make that comparison. You were just stupid.
Well, I think they called that themselves. Some people sued and they had lost money. They had been invested.
You'll never get back what you lost.
You never get back what you lost.
Never.
Now, about all the people that were thrown out of their homes, I hear figures 10 million, 12 million, families. That's families.
Families.
That's families.
Not single individual families.
Yeah, right. We're done it. And it was done, in your assumption, when that was done as part of it started earlier and everything, but it came to a culmination in terms of a systems attack upon the whole economic system in 2008 and so forth.
Well, they say 7, 8.
7, 8, yeah, like that. And that was done in a way, particularly, we have another friend that we have, this Raja Nawaz, who is beyond forensic, a forensic real investigator who can go into exactly what happened with the notes that were had. Okay. And they would take a note, if I understand, you help me out, because you understand the law. I don't. With the degree you do, and I respect you normally, you and Joe Barton.
They took your note and then they turned around and sold to him, who in turn sold it to him, who in turn sold it to him, who in turn sold it to him.
Okay, let's say a note, or could that be a mortgage? A note is a loan or something.
There's two parts to the word.
Now we're getting into the sacerdotal. This is like the alchemy of everything, you know. And they keep it gobbledygook that they can understand in order to hoodwink or garner money from people that they
don't know.
So it's the idea of having a specialization. You understand that you can hoodwink other people who don't, particularly if it gets to where it involves money and big things like houses and so forth. Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's ripe for the picking.
And you must also understand the context of the mortgage fraud.
Yeah.
In the context of this concept called gentrification. We call it
gentrification.
Gentrification.
Yeah.
We call it ethnic cleansing.
Yeah,
okay?
right.
Because a vast majority were people of color who, many of them own their homes 30, 40 years, like myself.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see, go up to Harlem, go to Bedford-Stuyvesant, East New York.
Yeah.
People who've owned their homes 40, 30, 40, 50 years are no longer there.
Because of this thing that kicked in.
It was a plan. It was planned from the start, many years back.
So they would take a note, or if you have a co-op or something, it might be a note for a loan that you took for the shares that you have in a co-op, or it could be a mortgage on a piece of real property or something, and then they would take that and then they would securitize it. Maybe you can explain something. Let me finish.
Yeah.
They'd securitize it, and then they would turn it into a package and package it as a bond.
Okay.
And the bond is always in the mind of most people very, very top level, secure. For security, you may not get quite as good a yield as you would, but it's secure. That's the main feature of it. They would do that, and they would do it 10, 30 times sometimes.
Okay, so
on one note or one thing.
No, it's not one note. Let me tell you what they do.
Now go through those things like the securitization process, the bundling, turning a note or a mortgage or something into a bond, a securitized bond that they would then sell to the bond market, and go through that with me, because that was part of what happened, and it was the actual thing that they had in there. They didn't know it had no value at all.
Okay, so let me tell you.
Straighten that out.
Okay.
And then also, if that is the case, is that a defense by the people who have been so in such large numbers? They would know. They couldn't get through all that. They couldn't understand it. So they were just hoodwinked.
Let me explain to you.
And is there a remedy for those people that has been able to effectively be utilized and might be able to utilize in the interest of the people who have been hoodwinked by this scam for the time ahead?
Yes.
Thank you, Consular. The floor is yours.
First of all, what happened was, let's say, they created this concept of a bond. Okay.
A bond.
A bond.
Like the bond market.
Yeah. And what they did was they went to the investors and they said, in this bond, I have 100 mortgages, just for argument's sake. Okay. The person is then told these 100 mortgages are secured by the property from XYZ. They then took this bond.
That's the original note.
Yes. So they then went to the rating companies, as you've heard.
Yeah.
And the rating companies rated those bonds AAA.
Each one of them?
Each bond. But they examine all the mortgages in them and then give a certification on the bond. Okay, which is those 100 mortgages in it.
And there might have gone from one note to...
No, that's something different. That's something different. Okay.
This securitization.
So the securitization concept is saying that this bond is secured by the property. So they're pledging the property to back up the bond.
It'd be like collateralization.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they go to the investors, and the investors, looking at this rating, says, yeah, I'll pay, because this bond is going to pay me X amount of dollars per day.
Steady.
Steady money.
Yeah.
Okay?
And safe.
Yes.
The thing of the bond market is it's safe.
Okay.
It is long-term,
old
wealth.
There are lawsuits against the bonds because the bond raters, because it's turned out that many times after they rated a bond AAA on the first day, the day after it junked. It fell. The people weren't able to make the first payment.
Aren't those, okay, there's a question that comes to mind. The rating agencies and
were
so
part
forth,
of the fraud.
And Moody's and
yes, there were three major: Standard & Poor's, Moody's. Okay.
Now, haven't they got a long-term? Were they hoodwinked?
No, let's.
Or were they in on the game?
Listen, you have to understand that their defense, when brought before Congress, was that we are simply rating companies, and it's our opinion that you are relying on.
Yeah,
but the thing is, a rating company is required to give more than an opinion. It's not your opinion; it's your evaluation that we are looking for, not your opinion.
Taking that all into account, the rating agencies and the ratings given to various
bonds.
Various economic entities or something. A rating is something that's been very important that be accurate for the people in the investment class.
Up until now.
There's been forces within the society that would trying to assure that those things that they depend upon to make their decisions are valid.
Okay, for example,
is that just gone by the board?
Wells Fargo owns one of the rating companies.
Okay, yeah.
And Wells Fargo is one of the companies that were creating these bonds. So it was their own best interest to own a rating company to rate their bonds that were rated A1 when they were junk.
That's like the fox and the hen coop.
Okay, but let me tell you, let me finish this. Okay, so you got this bond, and you got 100 mortgages in it.
Well, how did you get 100 off one?
Wait a minute. They were fake mortgages to start with.
Fake.
Go
on. Fake mortgages on a given piece of existing property?
Wait. They created the mortgages using fake names, using fake identities, and using fake properties, and then sold them to the investors.
Well, wait a minute, stop. So they created a thing. It wasn't at all relating to any. It was on the moon or something. It wasn't anywhere. It didn't relate to any piece of an asset anywhere on the earth.
Right.
It just out of whole cloth.
They created the fake names that went into those mortgages.
Well.
Okay, now, but as a bond purchaser...
It's getting harder and harder to understand.
But as a bond purchaser, you do not see the names of those mortgages or those people or those properties. All you see is the rating on the bond.
The bond includes all the others.
That's supposed to have all those mortgages.
Why can't you look at... somebody, if there's a great interest, would want to know what, okay, I see you've got a package here, but I would like to be able to have a look and have my accountant take a look at all those various properties that are in there. That is not made available to you?
Okay, let's say you...
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay, let's say...
Because there's a lot of money involved.
Yes,
you would have people...
But you're saying, I want to take a look, and they're saying, look, these bonds are flying, they're hot. You hear about them all over the world. People are buying them. You don't get in now, you're not going to get in. So many people are going to just go right on in. They're not, and they're assuming they're dealing with honorable people. So they're talking fast.
Yeah, well, that's
part of the scam.
Well, that's what I would have assumed, that they were, a lot of these people and institutions that you're talking about are assumed by this general society as being
unapproachable.
Yeah.
Unapproachable.
Have they been historically ever?
Up until
Has
this
it been going on always?
But listen, Harold, this concept of defrauding people, this goes back hundreds of years. One of the greatest...
Haven't there been remedies over the years for things that were
Have you ever heard of the Great Tulip Bulb scam?
Yeah, sure, in Holland. Yeah.
Okay. That was here too. That wasn't just Holland.
Yeah, okay,
it was the bulbs from Holland that was happening here.
Yeah.
We've also had the Great Oil Tanker. Let me tell you what that one was. That was in the middle of the country, where the idea of oil was just beginning to be understood as a commodity.
Yeah.
So they would get all these investors and they take them down there and they look in there and they see this tanker full of oil, right?
Yeah.
And then they take them off, and next thing you know, the guys are down there paint the side of the ship with a brand new name to go to another port to sell that same barrel of oil to new investors again. Scamming the American people has been part of the tradition of our country and of business and government. people are just beginning to realize that it's a repeat performance.
Well, so this thing we're talking about is just something that's always been there? It's not like something
it happens over and over again, and over again. And
what do you mean? Have there been cycles where this happens in greater amount?
All the time.
Did it happen back in '29 when the crash led to it?
The crash of '29 was a issue with what we call banking fraud, and that was done with the help of the major banks and the government. And
so there's precedent for this thing that's happened
more
recently.
In the United States?
Not for fraud, for specifically the kind of thing that's going that you're describing.
Okay, I know you've heard them. People haven't been come to the country and bought the Brooklyn Bridge a million times over.
Well, I'm not sure anybody ever was able to be so scammed or so.
No, there are plenty of stories of people having sold
sucker born every day, Mr. Bailey
every kind of
said,
day.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me finish with the bond. Okay, you got fake names in the bond. The investors have given you the money. They then took part of the money, as Roger was explaining, and put it in their pocket. They then took the rest of the money and they went out into the communities and said, listen, you need a mortgage, I'm going to write you a mortgage. So they got someone to fit into that pre-existing mortgage concept of a house on X block or for X amount of dollars and fit the people in. That was all illegal.
But those things on X block did not exist?
Not at the beginning.
Well, wait a minute. There's an address. It's Ohio Street in Dayton, Ohio, or something. I mean, it has to be something that would relate to the geographical reality, wouldn't there?
If you were going to look down there, you would find that. But if you probably looked down there, no. It was just a name and an address. And also, here in Bedford-Stuyvesant, I know that on particular days, groups of people used to fan out in the community, knock on the door, talk to you. How are you? You're Mrs. So-and-so. Do you know Miss So-and-so? Getting names and numbers to be able to create phony mortgages and addresses.
Good grief. Yeah.
It's a massive, Harold, massive, countrywide. Every state, every city, every community, practically every block. How big of an institution would you have to be able to do that across the United States?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking
about.
And
is it something that, what I'm trying to get at, does it like it metastasizes? It's there, and then for a while it doesn't?
No.
Things are legitimate? Or people assume that notes that the banks hold or the things that they come and foreclose, that it's a legitimate thing, and they're a legitimate, it's a legitimate system that you're involved with?
Yes, they're assuming, but it's not.
It never. What I'm trying to get at, you're talking in absolutes, as though there's nothing but corruption. That's all there is.
Once upon a time, you go to the bank, you write your mortgage, you pay the bank every month for 30 years.
That's the way. Fire, burn the note.
Okay, that's the way it used to be.
When is it like that?
Up until I would say the latter part of, or maybe early 70s.
Okay, well
when all of a sudden the banks and the guys on Wall Street started saying, I don't wait 30 years for my mortgage, my money. I'm going to pull these mortgages together. I'm going to get somebody to buy them, and I'm going to have my money, and I'm going to be gone. But then they realized, if I get you to buy this one, I can get her to buy this one. I can take that same bond and sell it to 100 different people who know
bond,
who don't know one another. You don't know one another.
Right, that's true.
I mean, sitting at the phone, I'm just calling different people, and they got the list of all the investors around the world. So why shouldn't they scam you?
And they got a new cyber capability to move fast.
Very fast.
Yeah.
So why should
that's a new feature too of the 70s or 80s.
But the thing is that at that point, government was supposed to step in.
The government agencies, are they being gutted in terms of lack of funds to be able to adequately carry out their mandate to regulate? Or are they in on the scam? Is the political class in on it? And they wink, nod. And how have they let all these banks get off with not having any answerability at all for the distress that they brought to these people have brought to the society, which includes the largest 10 banks in the whole country, J.P. Morgan and so on. How have they been able to get off without any retribution or any answering of anything?
Nothing.
Why? How? How can that be? And why is there not some effective bringing to light this reality that would be interested, particularly when you think 12 million families out on the street because these guys messed up and nothing happens to them.
There you go, messed up, planned, executed, and robbed the people.
Well, why aren't they in prison?
Because we, the people, don't have the power. Don't you understand? The people who are in positions in all these government agencies were placed there in advance by the people who are going to pull the scheme.
Yeah, but you've got an absolutist kind of thing coming down here that's a little hard to understand. So that involves the President of the United States, every single senator within the Senate of the United States, every state legislature, the whole system is nothing but corrupt, with one winking at another and scratching the back of the other in order to hoodwink and take advantage of the people? Is that what your premise is?
Well, first of all, let's understand.
That's called systemic.
Okay.
It's systemically corrupt.
Start off with understanding when you say every senator. When they repealed the Glass-Steagall Act,
99,
every senator in the United States voted for it. Or they play the game, just enough vote for it so that it can pass and the others can say we voted against it. Second of all, let's understand that it's also...
It's worth mentioning Glass-Steagall separated commercial banks from investment banks.
Yes. Also,
the gamblers from the secure.
That when President Clinton, you asked were presidents possibly understood what was going on? When he started with his Affordable Homes Act for America, that was another step in the right direction to be able to create the possibility of defrauding the people. Because what happened was the major banks and the banking institutions all got together to work on, quote, the requirements, because they were saying the requirements for in order for you to qualify.
Under this legislation, you mean? Yeah,
to qualify for a mortgage, because they were saying that the reason that the minority ownership was so bad was that they couldn't qualify. They never looked at the reality was that before we got into mortgage fraud and robo-signing, the communities of color were all surrounded by red lines.
Redlining.
So that was the premise that stopped home ownership.
You're right.
It wasn't because people weren't qualified. It was a fraud on the parts of the bank. So when they realized that the people were demanding that you turn around, if you want our money in our community, you make available mortgages to us like everybody else, they said, wait a minute. Here's what we could do. Let's flip it on the other side. Let's make mortgages available to everybody. Let's open the gate, whether they qualified or not, and when they can't qualify, look what do we get? We get our houses back, and we get the government to give us the money that we supposedly lost.
Well, they did with the derivatives, with AIG and everything. But what I'm getting at is, if you look at American society, I don't know, from before or after, where the Second War got us out of the Depression and everything, the thing that created the most important way in which Americans created what is called increasing net worth it was the steady, almost solid as a rock appreciation of value of real estate property that went up like that. You buy a house for $5,000, 10 years it's 10 or 15, and that was something that could be seen for decades. So you're seeing that, then you're saying, and then you've got a society which limits
great segments of the society.
Limits in broad terms to old wealth or accumulated savings, people that have accumulated savings which can put up collateral in order to invest in something that's going to pay for itself out of its future earnings is a good business proposition. 5 to 7 years it will pay for the acquisition costs of an asset. So that's only available to people who have collateral. But if you got a thing that's going steady up, it's steady as a rock. Everybody can see that. Your property is going to go up. That's what built the net worth of a great deal of what they call the middle class, was the appreciation of their real estate property that seemed to go up unhindered for decades, for 5, 6, 7 decades. So it would be understandable where people of good conscience, rather than being scam artists, were saying, look, why don't we make it so that they can use their the obvious increased value of the home which they're going to buy as some sort of collateral like a leverage collateralization of what's going to be obviously a very more valuable research, to let them, the people, get in on the logic of finance. Is you make an investment, you're going to make an investment that's going to pay for itself out of its future earnings or worth. Isn't that the logic?
Okay.
So it would be all done trying to help people.
Okay.
Not scamming.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
You understand?
Then you're missing the point.
Okay.
They understood the value of the increased wealth of the property as the property value increased.
That's how net worth was built.
Okay, but here's what they did.
Primarily.
They went out and they said, this house is worth $200,000. I'll send Joe over there to do the appraisal. Joe will do the appraisal on the house, and it's going to come in $400,000. Then you're going to get a bank loan on $400,000 that you're going to have to make payments. You can't make that $400,000 payment, so you're going to lose your house. And I'm going to wind up with the money that I lent you, all the money you made, and your house.
Okay, well, that was then perceived by somebody who could see the scamability of what was being done by taking advantage of people by having it having
a rigged appraisal?
Well, no. What I'm trying to say is you can identify the logic of somebody which net worth was gained by people not so much by their wages, but it was gained by the appreciation. If you buy a car, it doesn't appreciate. It depreciates. Yes. The only thing that didn't depreciate for 7 decades, it was steady. And that was not flim-flam.
No.
It was steady.
Hard-working people built those communities. Okay? And they paid for those houses, and those houses were paid for.
And they were worth more.
It was when the scam was released.
Well,
they did not want to spend another 100 years waiting for people to have their houses go up.
Well, it was a way of getting some. The reason people are poor is because they don't have any access to capital credit.
That's not true, Harold.
Well, no, I'm going to suggest it.
No, I'm sorry, that's not true. Long before all these scams came, people who were, quote, poor were living just fine. They weren't in debt. There weren't weren't as many broken up homes. There weren't as many uneducated kids.
Yeah.
The concept that you're suggesting is that the creation of this concept of wealth is what's going to pick everybody up. This concept of creation of wealth was what actually flim-flammed the people and turned society upside down.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So you don't think that those who have accumulated wealth are able to put up collateral, and if you're in a system that's legitimate, they can put up the collateral for an investment that is going to pay for itself not only out of its past savings, which is, Charles de Gaulle said to stick to past savings increase, and Harold Moulton said it'll just create an eternal class struggle where it'll just be the accumulated wealth. They can put up collateral, so therefore that can be let go in order to buy the thing that there is going to pay for itself within 5, 6, 7 years, and then throw off profit after that. That's how they get wealthy.
Assuming that its profit was going to be shown after 5 and 7 years.
It is.
It doesn't always happen.
No, Harold. It doesn't always happen, but it did. That's how they got rich.
That's part of the scam of how they
well, you keep turning the whole universe into a scam.
But you keep
listening.
Tell me something. After all these generations, if all that was so true, then why is it still the top part and the bottom part?
Because they haven't got a thing. For one thing, they haven't got the concept of, they've been sold a bill of goods that they are going to, the least advantaged people of the world have been sold a bill of goods that they can, by their hard work and good Horatio Alger effort, become successful on their own by getting a good job, paying well, getting a thing, and it applies for some people.
And most of the time, for a lot of people, it did happen until those who had the power to create the scam came along and said, this guy works 9 to 5.
I'm not talking,
Wait a minute, he puts his money in the bank. Let's figure out some way to get him his money out of the bank. Let's sell him a pipe dream. That's where it all came to fall down. The country was growing going up slowly. Everybody was beginning to acquire wealth in this country. After the 40s and 50s, even the poorest people were able to survive.
Well, they were able to
but
do...
But now...
Yeah, but they were able to do that.
You have larger segments of people who are in poverty now than ever before.
I'm trying to dissuade you of saying the universe is nothing but a scam.
I'm not talking about the universe.
You're saying every institution
I'm talking about
corrupt.
Across this country now.
Every
across this country now, yes.
Okay, well, if you want to say that,
yes,
you can.
Down across this country now, the education system, the distribution of food, the medical, the purchase of a car. You buy a car today, and I bet you I could punch it and dent it, and you pay $10,000 to have the insurance fix it. That's a scam.
Okay, you make the point, but it's that that was in a period that was a unique one for the United States or for the world, where the people, first of all, people had to go and work on the assembly line of Mr. Ford when they got off the family farm. That was the major employment in the turn of the 19th, 20th century, saying family farm. So then came combines and things, and industrialization, and they could
Same thing that happened in England.
And they got that down. That was the major source. The second, the most thing for employment was domestics. They had domestics in the turn of the century. So then what happened is they were able to then, the labor input to the production, that is the labor that people could perform, had real worth.
Yeah,
it had a real value.
Yes,
and it was important,
and
it was needed, and you had a labor union.
But would you say how?
No, but I'm trying to make a point beyond the one you're doing.
But you're saying they had real value when they went to work for the factory. I think they had real value when they were home raising their children and taking care of the home farm. I think the concept that we split is as what you consider value as what I consider value. I consider the worth of the people value, not only mechanization.
Well, okay, but the mechanization is what's happening, and that's characteristic of the evolution of the society. And the input to production, which would have been in the 40s and 50s, there was the input to production of labor in all of its aspects, and then you got all the economists coming, was really very, very crucial and important and sizable. And the whole trend, I'm trying to say, the whole trend is to the labor input to the productive, the way they figured the economy. It was, in Tom Jefferson's day, there was only about 10% of anything other than labor. You had some land, you had a lot of land, but the labor really had to be there. Trees to cut down. And you get down, and if you look at the United States economy, it's just about shifted by the time we get to our time. It's only about 10% or 10%. It's shifted. It's the capital instruments are the source of the production.
No,
that's the trend.
It's the labor that was the source of the production.
No, there is an assumption on the part of, I'm trying to suggest to you, the assumption on the part of the left and the assumption on the part of the people who are poor and that kind of stuff was they wanted to give importance to the labor, and they got labor unions. My granddaddy was a laborer, and they got hit on the head, and they really did. Now, the private sector now is down to about 5% of the population. It used to be 40, 50% of the people. They had the most important office across from the White House. The labor was really powerful. They could write things. And what did they get? They didn't get ownership of the technology that was coming, that was producing the wealth. They didn't get ownership of that. They don't want the ownership.
That's not necessarily.
They didn't. They could have bargained for it.
That's the American model. If you look at
American model,
but look at the other
characteristic of the world.
No, it's not. You look at some of the other countries, some of the models of labor. They have ownership by the people.
No, hardly anywhere. Hardly anywhere. Hardly anywhere.
How, for example, in Italy, when someone gets unemployed, they don't get a check. You know what you get? You get a sizable amount that you're required to go up with other unemployed people to create a job.
Well,
you'll create a business. You're not given a check to sit down and lay back and spend it.
No.
Okay, but
this is a big.
It's the idea of the people that's finally getting a chance to break through. No, and not only the ideas of the corporate mentality that's being forced down on the people.
You've got two things. You've got mankind and labor and what they can do, And then you have all the extensions of mankind's capability. It's called technology and capital assets.
And
the capital assets, I'm sorry, you may say that, and that's the thing they want to do, and labor is important. They were able to get a minimum wage. They were able to get a decent wage. Man had one job, and he sent all the kids to college. It was great. Their labor was in command. The labor unions backed them up. The labor was powerful. They could make a claim upon the income that they would have. They never paid attention. They never bargained for ownership.
Okay, but you got to also
understand the technology
but you also
that is displacing them.
Okay, but you also got to understand that the owners and the labor leaders got together.
Well, perhaps
there's together, and that was one of the problems, because the people were trying to do something.
No, the people who have capital do not work. What they do is they have the capital that they can put up and invest in something that's going to be worth more and earn income. That's called the logic of business finance. It's only those who already have the capital can do that. To have a way in which the people can have a way, that's what the derivatives were originally wanting to do. They should be within the private, it should be in the, our man Muammar Gaddafi was one place where when you formed a business in Muammar Gaddafi's Libya, you couldn't hire anybody. The labor. But you see, the left and the people concerned with the poor are singing the praises of hard work. Now, wait a minute. That's something. That's a ratio algebra and all that bullshit by which they do it. And meanwhile, the people with the wealth don't care at all about that. They've got the wealth, and it's all going to them.
And they created the ratio algebra story in order to get you to believe that you can bust your behind for 100 years, and when you finish,
but you don't blame them. You blame the but you're trying to get at it in a systems way. All you're doing is making it all a big scam.
With the wealth, they can block anything else.
Why are things so bad now? And it is because it's gone. I'm sorry, you can dismiss that, but that's the thing that's going on. The input to production is going in the United States, so you can track the best and everything, but it's only about 10% of the input to production is labor. No, 10%. It was exact opposite. And the people who say get a job, and they tell you what you got to do is get a job. They're going to get a job on our estate. Don't talk about them owning anything.
Okay.
Because the left says the work is so wonderful.
Okay, but
and they're so powerful, and they're representing the labor unions and so forth. So they've got to get a way to hoist the system on its own petard if they want to get at the bottom line.
The idea that the benefits of the increased technology was supposed to give the people greater leisure and flexibility of time to be with their family. It was not for wait a minute. It was not for the increase in generation of wealth for the wealthy.
Well, okay, I'm just saying you can say it was.
That's what it was supposed to do.
You can say it's the blame.
The people were supposed to be.
It's a scam of the established accumulators of wealth.
You don't have to call it a scam. You can call it a system.
No, you call it
a mechanized system.
Good.
A mechanized system in order to exploit people to generate wealth.
That's good for thinking that way. And what it did, what you notice what it did, is it was along the line, solidarity forever, and the workers will be free, and you're going to work, and you're going to get a minimum wage, and you're going to get money by working, having a job. You're not going to ever, as Mr. Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, you could not hire anybody. You could not give anybody a job. Everybody that made up the investment, the company in the private sector, they distributed a lot of money. They distributed and built the country up great, socially, governmentally. But if in the private sector, you couldn't hire anybody. Everybody had to be the owner of the capital assets of the company. That's progressive. And that's called not, and that's tracking the way things are actually going. And the left doesn't have an answer to hoist capitalism on its own petard. They were trying to do
more business here are worker-owned than ever before.
No, not at all. No. Minuscule.
Harold, the biggest strike in the last couple of years have been the factory in Chicago with the windows. The guy who owned the window company came in. This happened just a couple of months ago. He came in and he told everybody, you're fired. Everybody went there, got their family, came back to the factory, and sat there and said, "We're not leaving, and you're not."
Okay, that's a nice idiosyncratic story. It's not characteristic. Have you noticed the wealth and differentiation and the tens in this country? Do you notice how everything's going to the top?
Yes.
Do you notice how it's going to 100th of 1%? And that the people are being, and Lord Keynes himself, who set up everything, International Monetary Fund, said labor is going to be displaced.
Okay.
So you don't sing the praises of labor and solidarity and all that. You have to get, and you have to give a means by hoisting capitalism, private property, stock, capital, ownership of a valuable thing, creating wealth, democratized to everybody as a way of distributing demand rather than work. Yes. That's something that never comes up on the left. They just call it all a scam.
It comes up, but it's beat down.
No, it isn't. It never comes up.
Harold, that's not possible.
No, it isn't.
Listen, you've had railroad strikes where people were talking about ownership of the railroad.
No.
Way back in the 1800s.
No, they never. No, have you looked at the ownership? Have you looked at the ownership of stock?
Do you know what happened to all the rich guys in I think in the 1800s who went to this meeting with Carnegie, upstate New York, in the steel mine? There were all these different steel mine companies.
Well, if you think...
Wait a minute, let me tell you the story, okay?
Okay, we only got a couple minutes left. Go fast. Do haiku. Haiku.
They went there and they designed a program so they can distribute all the wealth, okay?
Distribute the wealth.
The wealth of the steel.
No. Capital credit to have access to buy the capital that's going to pay for itself out of its future earnings.
Okay.
That's what.
Okay. So everybody went upstate New York. You can look this up. And they went into the mine to explore the coal for the railroad. Carnegie wasn't there. I believe it was Carnegie. The mine blew up and killed all his competitors.
Okay, I'm trying to get the story. I don't understand.
There were people who were trying to set up a system that could distribute the wealth over a larger
Distribute the wealth how? They're going to distribute. You can distribute the wealth, tax the rich, and distribute it out through taxes. You could do that, or you could have Franklin Roosevelt. You could do that. But the one thing you're not going to do.
Why can't we do that?
No, but the one thing.
Why can't we do that, Harold? Right here, right now.
Well, you could try.
Why can't we? Why can't we tax the rich? Why are we not able to do that?
Because because they have such power.
That's what we're talking
Because we're talking it's all a scam rather than coming up with something. The thing is, we have a capability to realize that a larger thinking. Do you realize 1970, the weapons became species lethal?
Yes, Harold,
Do you realize at a level of total capability that we have transcended scarcity on the side of the good of that other equation? That's a reality that's existentially new. An ecological capability. We have a way of making everybody on the planet able to have a full, liberated context, or we have the ability to eliminate it. We need some creative thinking that's going to include everybody, and we have to have something that'll include the capitalists, but it'll have to be a period of hoisting them on their own petard. That's Shakespeare. And not just saying they're bastards for taking the idea of private property ownership is something worthy of getting to everybody. Okay, but it doesn't come up in the dialogue. All you do is...
First of all, the idea...
And that's what Mr. Obama's trying.
Okay, first of all, the idea of calling them bastards
will
be brand new because we have been calling them entrepreneurs.
Great
men. Okay, so let's call them exactly what they are.
And I agree.
And change the dialogue to start with there. Okay?
And
if we just change the dialogue right there, I think that's a start.
Well, that is. You're right.
Captains of industry, thieves, liars.
All right. I'm with you. I'm on the line. I will. I know. And that's the thing we have to do. And what we have to do is take advantage of things that can do something in support of the poor, suffering masses of the world, but we should be doing it if we possibly can within a larger context so we can get at the answer rather than just dealing with another symptom of a history that isn't worthy of emulating. We have to be transcending history and moving into a new order of universal justice.
Start off with stop calling them such great people.
I never called them.
Start off by recognizing that they're sleaze, that they're thieves, that
outside
they're
of
liars.
that, all of you that we're trying to get some.
When you just change the mentality of thinking of who these people are,
well,
it does.
I'm trying to make a case for the fact that a lot of those people aren't such scams, and they're trying to do good, but they don't have a vision. We have to educate them and bring them included into under the tent.
Okay.
Okay.
I see.
And by doing that, we have to get militant. right. And I'm all with you. And thank you for the good work. And
it's always a pleasure.
It was so good talking to you. Just making another suggestion that's worthy of throwing it in the pot. Randy Corbett, thank you very much. Very good. Thank you for viewing. Always a pleasure. I am of the opinion, I think it's just the most incredible time to be alive. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. Randy, thanks a whole lot. We just got started talking.
We always get started. Okay.
We always just get started.
And before you know it, it's over.